Got to take a look back and make sure nothing important is viewable on my screen. Nothing work sensitive. And it looks like you wouldn't be able to see it anyways. And I think I need to adjust the ND filter a little bit. That maybe looks like a good spot. Let's see, I'm not getting any eye focus, but anyways, thanks for stopping by in this video. I know Vlogmas has not been too kind to me, or I haven't been too kind to Vlogmas. I definitely have not been keeping up on that schedule. But as you see in my last video, I was sick for a while, plus a new game came out, so I had to play that. It's been a busy week as well, especially with work. A lot of meetings, a lot of deadlines to meet. It's been crazy, so Vlogmas has been broken. I apologize. Definitely haven't been keeping up on my word. But today I want to talk about this thing called code switching, as was referenced in the anime Big Mouth Netflix. Not sponsored by them or anything. I feel like there's I can see something glistening up by my eye. I don't know what it is. Like a hair? Anyways, so code switching. After watching that episode, it's definitely a real thing, and I just want to get that out there. Code switching is a real thing that I would think that people, black community, minority community, when you grow up in a majority minority community, you have a certain personality that you have, one that you kind of gain in your environment that everybody has. Is like your natural personality. The things you say, the things you do, the things you want to do, all those sort of little things, those personality quirks you develop in your community. And, it's a part of who you are. But I also want to say for those that grew up in those communities, at least for several years, but then switched to a majority white community like I did growing up. You start noticing things. It becomes kind of an eye-opening experience, because when you go from majority black or majority minority to a majority white, you notice that there are a lot of differences between beliefs and the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, the way you do everything. Just about everything is pretty much different. And then, at least in my case, I wanted to make friends. You quickly learn that I'm not going to talk in terms of being a kid. You quickly learn that these kids don't really want to be your friend because they don't really understand you, or they haven't seen that many of your kind of people before, so they're I wouldn't say afraid. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but they're often reserved, and when they listen to you talk and say certain things or do certain things, they often, at least in my case growing up, don't really want much to do with you. They kind of ignore you, go about doing their own things, and as a kid that really sucks, because you don't really understand why, especially as a minority, why these kids are acting that way, why it seems like they don't want to be friends with you. Or as a boy growing up, I'm sure it's the same thing for girls, but we start finding yourself being interested in, I don't want to say the opposite sex, because I'm sure there are some kids that grow up knowing that they're gay, but you start finding yourself interested in the other people in a more than friendly way. You start to wonder, why is it that it seems like they just have no interest in you, and you don't understand. You feel like you could be just as good looking as somebody of the same gender, and maybe sometimes even better looking than the same gender. At least that's what you would used to think, and then you get knocked down a few pegs because you don't understand that the reason why they're not really into you isn't because of your looks, but it's more because of the color of your skin. Something I learned growing up. And sometimes it's not even just the color of your skin, it's just the way you are, the way you talk, the way you act, the way you carry yourself. You learn that when you go from majority minority community to a majority white community, they are used to, and I say they as in the white community, and I hate saying that because I almost feel like I'm being racist about it, but I'm not trying to be. But they are into certain things that they grew up with, and that would, in my case growing up, most of the white girls were into the country boys and lifted trucks and country music and stuff like that, which I was nothing like that. I mean, just look at me. I was never anything like that. never had any interest in those sort of things, or they were really into like certain kind of dog breeds that I was never into, or just all kinds of things that kind of separate me from them, from the things that they like. And it goes deeper than just how I looked. And growing up, you don't really understand that it's less of the way you look, or sometimes it's more of the way you look. I've definitely have my run-ins with those, but it's also more of the things that you're into and the things that you're not into. I mean, I remember actually in high school there were some white girls that were like blatantly racist towards me. They treated me and talked to me as an inferior being. And I know it wasn't just like one of those sexist things, because I noticed how they talk to other white guys. And so anyways, what I'm trying to get at is that when you're growing up, you notice these things, these differences of what, like the other kids that you want to be friends with and the other kids that you're more romantically interested in, they're not into the way you are. And so you kind of start observing them, at least in my case, start observing them and seeing their quirks and how they talk and how they act and the way they are. You start picking up on those things and noticing that, hey, these people acting this way gets these kinds of results. And so as you pick up on things, you kind of start implementing it in yourself subconsciously. I didn't even really notice it growing up until like much later, when people started commenting on how I kind of act different in different kind of situations. But you start picking up on these things, and then you start implementing them. And then once you start implementing them, acting differently, talking differently, you start noticing that suddenly these people that wanted nothing to do with you are suddenly interested in being like your friend and stuff. And that's when the whole code switching thing comes into play. Because at that point, whenever you're around this certain type of people, you act a certain type of way, versus when you're around another type of people, you act that kind of way. Now, it's kind of like, in one example, my wife, she noticed me being kind of different as well, where whenever I'm with my family and she's around, she made a comment to me asking me if, kind of like, why I'm acting differently and why I'm talking differently and stuff like that. And it kind of took me back, threw me by surprise, because it was not a question I was asked before. And at that point, she kind of said that she didn't really recognize me or didn't really know who I really was. And it made me really kind of think about, who is it that I actually am? Am I the guy that acts a certain type of way when I'm around my black family members, or am I the other kind of guy that I act when I'm around my white friends and my white family members? And to me, I feel like they're both a part of me, especially like growing up and being that kind of way, being able to code switch. I feel like they're both a part of me, because on one hand, I enjoy the way I am with my black family members. I enjoy the way I am, how I talk to them, how I interact with them, how I joke around with them. That's one part of me that I enjoy. And the other part of me that I am when I code switch to being, I hate to say, a little more white, I also enjoy that side, because I feel like that part of me is also a fun part of me, that the way I interact with my white family members and my white friends, and how I talk to them and interact with them, I find both ways being a fun way to interact with people. Now, I don't know if that's just because of the way I was conditioned growing up to be okay with both spectrums of the way I am, but I feel like they're both a part of me. And I have that code switch just like in Big Mouth, where I can talk to pretzels, except in my case, it's I can talk to burritos. I have burrito language. But yeah, watching that episode really made me think about it. And I thought it'd be like an interesting thing to talk about, because I feel like it's not something that's that widely recognized or well known. I definitely didn't know how to explain it or talk about it to my wife at the time. But I think she's kind of accepted it more and more as time has gone by, because she hasn't really had any experience with anybody that has this code switching technique sort of thing. And I'm not really sure how else to explain it or talk about it, but it is definitely a real thing that minorities who grew up in minority communities and then switch to a non-minority dominant community and learning how to adjust to their new surroundings and try to fit in, because the worst thing about being a kid is feeling like you don't fit in anywhere. And that's how I felt a lot growing up. Even after I learned my code switching ability, I felt like I never fit in anywhere. I felt like a lot of people didn't like me for reasons that I could never understand. Kind of understand now, but back then I just couldn't understand, because I think in my case, I didn't really see color as much as some of the other kids and parents did. To me, everybody was the same, regardless of color. And that was very naive of me back then to think. And as I got older, I realized that your background does matter more on how you fit into places. And no matter how hard I tried, I would never fit into certain groups. And they wouldn't accept me. And I noticed that once I got to the high school age, some of the more popular black kids were the ones that acted the most white. They went a little more to the extreme of the code switching than I did, and so they fit in a lot more. I mean, they they fit in so well, and they switched over so well that, you know, they were even being kind of racist to their own kind of people, which confused me. But, you know, that's another story for another time. That actually also brings me back to another time. Another thing about the code switching is that whenever I'm on the phone with or like an important phone call, or doing an interview actually for a job, I do quite a bit of code switching for that as well, because growing up as well, I noticed that it's been a lot harder for someone like me to get a job at places, especially with how I kind of used to act back then versus how I act now. It's still very hard for me now, obviously. But I noticed that the less like myself I acted, the better my chances were. And I know that was a bit confusing, because I said the less like myself I acted, even though earlier I said that both the more white side and the more black side are parts of me. But I feel like I more naturally fit in with the kind of black side, fully because that's how I grew up, in the household I grew up in and the family I grew up with. So that's the more natural side of me. And I feel like the more natural side of me is the side that in this society I can't really be if I want to get to places, unless I'm like a rapper or something like that. And so I'd often get told whenever I'm on the phone with somebody that that they mistook me for a white person, or I sound very white. And it's just because of the way I adapt to my situation and my environment. So it kind of naturally happens. I don't even really think about it. I probably even act towards it when I'm doing videos for YouTube. I don't know. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. Code switching is actually a thing, something that's actually practiced. There are varying levels of how good one can be with that. Like I said, some are better at it than others, and that's even kind of subjective of if it's actually better or if it's just more to the extreme or not. But anyways, I just wanted to get this video out, talk about it, see what other people think about it, and if I open some eyes or some minds to it. Definitely don't mean this to be like a insulting thing towards the white side of my family now. It's just something that I wanted to talk about and get out there to just kind of bring awareness and whatnot. I'm really curious about if this video will actually get any sort of engagement from the community. Like if more people will talk about it or discuss it or even bring it to light in any sort of way. Probably won't want them to think or dream or whatever. Anyways, I'm done with this video. I'm out. Gotta get to work. Peace. Ooh, I didn't want to put my hand on that because I would have smudged my indie filter, so I'm just cut out. All right, bye.